When God leads you into new seasons, sometimes relationships may naturally change. Not everyone who walked with you in one season will necessarily walk with you into the next season. Sometimes growth and obedience to God leads to shifts in relationships because priorities change, values change, and sometimes life directions begin to just shift. And when God is doing a new thing in us, sometimes that requires us to release what's familiar so we can fully step into what God is doing. So that brings me to our fourth truth in the hard truth about obedience. Welcome back to part four. We've been walking through some of the real challenges that come with saying yes to God in whatever capacity that looks like. And truth number four is this: obedience can lead to changes in your relationships. And as God leads you into new seasons, not everyone will go with you. Today, we're talking about how obedience can affect your relationships in real ways. So, I want to start off with chapter 12 and 1. And we see this with Abraham when God calls Abraham and he tells him to leave his country, leave his relatives, and to leave his father's family and to go to the land that God will show him. And Abraham obeys and he leaves his country and father's household, but he takes his nephew Lot with him. And what we see later is that this created tension and complications. There was strife between their servants, and the situation became too heavy for both of them to remain in the same place. Eventually, separation had to happen. And after that separation, God speaks to Abraham again more clearly. Sometimes what God is calling you into cannot fully unfold while you are still holding on to something He already asked you to release. Not everyone can go with you on the journey, and sometimes separation is necessary, even when you don't fully understand it in the moment. But God wants us to obey anyway. So, my question to you is, what are you holding on to in your life that God may be asking you to release, but it's creating unnecessary tension or difficulty? And what would it look like to obey God more fully and more quickly, even when it's uncomfortable? Because when God calls you into obedience, it can reshape your life in ways that affect your relationships. Because following Him sometimes means moving forward even when others don't come with you. In Isaiah 43 and 19, it says, "Behold, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs forth. Do you not perceive it? I will make a way in the wilderness and rivers in the desert." The truth is, it's hard to embrace what God is doing in a new season when you're still holding on to what's familiar. And sometimes relationships shift, not always because something went wrong, but because something is changing. And instead of flowing with that shift, sometimes what we do is we resist it and we hold on, we struggle, and we try to keep what God is moving us out of. And when relationships shift and change and you resist it, you end up holding on to relationships that start to feel out of place, like something just doesn't fit the same anymore. In this video, I want to give you guys four signs that your season may be changing or that obedience is leading to shifts in your relationships. Sign number one is when the relationship begins fading or shifting. Relationships that once held an important role in your life begin to fade or shift. Sometimes it happens suddenly, and other times it's a slow drift over time that you almost don't notice until you look back. Maybe conversations don't flow the same. Maybe the connection feels different, and what used to feel aligned just doesn't fit the same anymore. It's not always rooted in conflict. Maybe it's just a shift in direction where two people may no longer be moving in the same way they used to. Sign number two is when there's a natural distance without conflict, meaning that there's no major fallout, there's no argument, and there's no clear ending, but the relationship simply isn't as active or as present as it once was. Maybe communication might become less. Maybe it's not as consistent. Maybe check ins are less, and time together doesn't happen as naturally anymore. And what makes this one difficult is that nothing bad happened, so it can feel confusing. But sometimes distance forms quietly when life priorities and seasons start to change. Sign number three is experiencing internal tension or a sense of uneasiness. Like maybe you feel caught between holding on and sensing that God is telling you to let go. And this might not always come with this might also come with a lack of peace. Like on one hand, you remember what it used to be and you want to preserve the connection. But on the other hand, there's an awareness that something feels different now. It can feel maybe like an inner tension, almost like you're trying to force something that's naturally shifting. And that internal discomfort is what makes it hard to ignore. Think about when God was shifting Abraham and Lot. What we see is that as they continued walking together, tension began to arise, and what once worked started to feel strained. And eventually there was conflict. And that pressure is what led them to go their separate ways. Sometimes what feels like inner uneasiness is really the reality that something is not meant to stay the same or that something is shifting. Sign number four is feeling pulled back spiritually. Maybe you notice that certain environments or relationships make it harder to stay aligned with what God is doing in your life. And instead of being encouraged to move forward, you feel pulled back into old habits, into old mindsets, or into distractions that you're trying to outgrow. So, if you're trying to grow spiritually and you're being pulled back, it might be a sign that God is shifting your relationships. Now, if you've been experiencing some of these shifts and changes in your relationships, it could be a sign that God may be transitioning you, that maybe you're being transitioned into a new season. And even though it can feel uncomfortable and unfamiliar, God calls us to embrace the new things He's doing in our life. So let me know in the comments which one resonates with you the most. And meet me back here next week as we go into part five of the hard truths about obedience. Thank you guys so much for watching. If this video helped you, go ahead and like this video, share it with someone who needs it, and don't forget to subscribe for more.